It's time for the CEO interview series on the Buckmaster Show, presented by Sun Corridor, Inc., a transformative economic development organization representing one of the most dynamic and growing major business centers in North America. Sun Corridor, Inc. is a CEO-driven regional alliance whose members aggressively champion mega-regional issues that impact economic competitiveness and quality of life. The organization has helped to drive significant business investment into the Tucson and Southern Arizona region through primary job creation, resulting in an economic impact of more than $30 billion, with 182 company locates and expansions, supporting nearly 53,000 jobs. For more information, visit suncorridorinc.com.
And joining us now on the Buckmaster Show live line, Joe Snell is with us, President and CEO of Sun Corridor, Inc., and Steve Eggen. Steve, retired Raytheon Missile Systems executive and chair of the 24-member COVID-19 Recovery and Response Steering Commission. Steve and Joe, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Bill. Good to be on.
Thank you, Bill. Glad to be here.
Joe, so many regions across the pretty much every region was so hard hit when things went south in March and April of last year in 2020. One of the remarkable things is that Tucson has garnered this tremendous publicity, rankings that we see and bode well, Joe Snell, for a strong recovery.
Well, we sure did. We suffered through the last recession, but since 2016, we have been a market that has really done well with the relocation of Caterpillar's mining headquarters, the Raytheon Missile Systems choosing Tucson for the missile headquarters. Just a lot of movement of companies in here. And as you said, the bottom dropped out. We went from unemployment of about 5% February 2020 to about 13% by April. So, we were very scared, but we had a lot of momentum going into the pandemic, and I think that it showed up early with rankings. Moody's Analytics ranked us as, one of the top 10 cities fastest to recover from the pandemic. We saw rankings on our talent, our ability to attract talent, our tech workers, our housing market. So just a plethora of nice rankings that other cities just didn't see during the pandemic.
Joe and Stephen, I remember when that Forbes piece came out that was published in May of 2020, Steve. It was good news. I thought, this is the first good news economically for our region that I had seen since the bottom fell out in March. And that one, that included that report and story included Tucson and showed some of the potential, talking about our low population density, growing tech, hub status, and home to higher education campuses. Steve, your reaction to that?
But, I tell you, Bill, that hit the nail on the head. When you think about an economy as robust as the one that we had heading into the pandemic, it hit everyone hard. But one of the things that we certainly had as an advantage was the fact that we were the low density area. Everyone was wanting to make sure we had wide open spaces. Well, we have wide open spaces here in our Tucson region. You want to look for affordable housing and have the outdoor activities we have, and we have that. We can offer that to our community and to our businesses. The one thing, Bill, that I'll tell you that was very important is that going into this pandemic, we had a health crisis. And what we wanted to do is we knew having a health crisis, you could have an economic crisis. So all the good things that we had going in, as people saw the things that were going on in these higher density areas, it was an attraction to us, and that was something that we needed to do and take advantage of and position our community to be well positioned for dealing with the pandemic. And that's exactly what the Pivot Playbook was really meant to do.
You've come up, Joe and Steve, with this Pivot Playbook. Tell our listeners, Joe, let's begin with you, and then Steve, please add to this. What was the goal of the playbook? How did this concept come about, Joe Snell?
Well, Bill, the concept is because we were greedy. We were enjoying very good economy, as Steve said. prior to the pandemic. And we sat down and said, oh, my gosh, two issues really drove it. It's how are we going to survive this pandemic? And Steve brings up a great point. I'd like to tip my hat to the healthcare workers here in Tucson. Our medical folks, showed the rest of the country how to do this, and they did a great job, from Banner to TMC to Northwest to everybody involved. But we sat back and we said, listen, we just got to deal with the pandemic, but more importantly, how are we want to get back on track. How are we going to look after the pandemic? Are we going to be able to really jumpstart things? Because we didn't want to, frankly, lose that great momentum we had right up until we had our best year in fiscal year 19 and then going into 20. So it was I say the word greed, but we just didn't want to go back to anything less than we had. So the leadership got together and said, let's figure this out. How are we going to put ourselves in the best position for success? And frankly, my board talked, and we tapped Steve Eggen to chair that. You don't get to retire when you're working with us. So he graciously accepted that offer, and we put together a who's who of steering committee. And Steve, you can take it from there, but it was quite successful.
Steve,
sure, I'll add a little color to that, Bill, and the fact that one of the things that we saw was the fact that yes, we had some very good press, and quite frankly, it was true in what our community had to offer. But we also knew that we had to address the same issues that many of these places were having to deal with. So as Joe said earlier, what we did is we took and grabbed a hold of the senior business and community leaders who are part of the Sun Corridor Inc. board and said what we are trying to do is to figure out how we can position ourselves to really take advantage of what's happened to us in a positive way, and make sure, just like the healthcare industry is dealing with this, how do we respond from an economic standpoint? Every senior executive that we talked to was interested in making sure they can contribute to that. That's the beauty of this thing, is we saw the community wholeheartedly want to respond. So the idea was to form a committee, and we did that. We formed a steering committee of as Joe mentioned, who's business leaders in our community, and said, what we want to do is we want to brainstorm what are the things that we see that we can have an impact on, what are the areas that we are seeing being impacted by this situation, and what do we need to do in order to address it to get ahead and to really stand tall to what those publications were saying were the advantages of our region. And in fact, that was the beginning of the development of the Pivot Playbook. So as a result of that, we ended up putting together a group of executives to have a number of subcommittees to address the areas of focus that the steering committee came up with in wanting us to really lead the charge in heading us out of this pandemic from an economic standpoint.
Steve Eggen, a quick follow-up to that. As an executive at Raytheon, and Joe understands this, when you put 24 people around the conference table, it's hard to get kind of a unanimous agreement on something. But did everybody, Steve and Joe, seem to be on board with this?
It's amazing, Bill, that when you have something as significant of a crisis, a call to action like we had, we did not have a lot of, I would say, negativeness. Everyone was really on a positive track of saying, what can we do to make a difference here? What do we want to do as the what ended up being 5 focus areas for us to work on? The subcommittees were very active in doing that, and it was a matter of just having the steering committee identify those 5 areas for the subcommittees to work. Now, were there challenges? Of course there are, because everyone brings their perspective from their industry into the discussion. And that's actually the beauty of it, because they were dealing with the pandemic real time. They were bringing those experiences real time into this discussion of the Pivot Playbook. So we had inputs from the healthcare industry, we had inputs from the defense industry, we had inputs from education, university systems. That's the beauty of having this kind of a way of approaching this whole thing.
And after we take the break, I want to go into the 5 focus areas. But Joe, a quick follow-up to what Steve was saying about getting everybody at the table on board to move forward.
Well, I would just say to add, Steve really captured it well. We spent quite a bit of money early and time And we hired an outside group to survey influencers and site selectors around the country. These are the guys that make the decisions where companies relocate. And they did a SWOT analysis for us, saying, here's where we think your strengths, weaknesses are. And with that, it was a nice launching point for our committee to sit back and say, all right, here's how others think of us. Here's what we think. We were able to then focus on where the gaps were. And so it was more natural of a process than a forced process. And it worked very well.
Joe Snell and Steve Eggen with us. Steve Eggen, retired Raytheon Missile Systems executive, and Joe Snell, CEO and president of Sun Corridor, Inc. We're going to take the break right here. When we come back with Steve and Joe, we're going to talk about these 5 focus areas that the steering committee agreed on. We'll talk about why these particular areas were chosen. We'll be right back with Steve and Joe.
Green Things is a family-owned and operated plant nursery serving Tucson since 1970. Open daily at 3384 East River Road, Green Things is chock full of plants and pottery from around the world. Green Things is also now home to Zocalo, featuring fine Mexican and South American imports spread over 5 buildings on the 13-acre Green Things property. For more, visit greenthingsaz.com and zocalovillage.com.
The Regional Transportation Authority plan is funded by a voter-approved half-cent sales tax, which expires in June 2026. To prepare for ongoing project delivery, the RTA Board established a Citizens Advisory Committee to select projects for a new draft plan. The committee will help identify which projects to invest in to best meet regional transportation needs. Learn more about plan development and provide early input at rtanext.com.
The average person in the USA today takes over 12 prescription medicines each year, and if you are over age 65, it is more than 17 medicines. CredibleMeds.org is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping inform you and your healthcare providers. Over 30,000 people die each year from reactions to their medicines. Don't be one of those numbers. Be informed and stay safe. Visit CredibleMeds.org today and take control of your healthcare by taking your medicines safely.
Hello, I'm Jeanette Bewley, President and CEO of the Tucson Airport Authority, with news of our new effort to ensure air traveler safety and security going through our terminal. It's called TUS Cares, and you can read more about it on our website, flytucson.com. As you carefully weigh your decision to fly, I want you to know whether it's next week, next month, or next year, we are here for you at Tucson International Airport. Thank you.
Hi, this is Pam Krim, CEO of the Better Business Bureau of Southern Arizona, where we set the standards for marketplace trust by engaging with and educating consumers and businesses. The BBB is the place to turn for objective and unbiased information on businesses. Learn more about the many services offered by the Better Business Bureau of Southern Arizona at bbb.org/Tucson.
As a small business owner, I appreciate the services of a top-notch certified public accountant. That's why Michael C. Flowers of Flowers, Rieger & Associates is the CPA firm of the Buckmaster Show. Michael's a former Small Business Leader of the Year in Tucson. He'll professionally handle all of your accounting needs and tax preparation services. Flowers, Rieger & Associates, 6125 East Grant Road, and on the web, flowersrieger.com. Family-owned Jam Culinary Concepts and its family of restaurants has you covered for your special event. Jam caters anytime, anywhere, any size group, and any type of cuisine. Vero Amore, authentic Neapolitan pizza, and Noble Hops. Craft beer and fine fare are synonymous with quality. Call 954-1468 or log on to jamculinaryconcepts.com. Welcome back. It is the Buckmaster Show. It's part 2 of our Sun Corridor, Inc. CEO interview series, and we're talking about the pivot playbook that Sun Corridor has developed as the economic recovery vehicle to coming out of the post-pandemic era. On the live line with us, Joe Snell, President and CEO of Sun Corridor, Inc., and Steve Eggen, retired Raytheon Missile Systems Executive and Chair of the 24-member COVID-19 Recovery and Response Steering Committee. Steve, when you got together and we were talking about sitting around the table, you had 24 business leaders, kind of a who's who of this community, and you came up with 5 focus areas. What are the areas and why were they chosen, Steve?
So let me first give you an idea of the areas, Bill, and they actually fall naturally out. And when you think about economic development, you think about attraction of businesses and what businesses are looking for, and that's the beauty of this whole idea of coming up with these 5 focus areas. The first one is company recruitment, and as you would expect, anytime you think about what you're trying to do, you have to have some leadership in looking at recruiting companies into our region. The second area has to do with the development and retention of people in our community. So the development of people and certainly the retention of people in businesses and in the community was the second focus area. And then the third focus area was one that falls naturally out of that, and that is training. We had a lot of displaced workers as a result of the pandemic, and one of the things we said we needed to do was to figure out what would be a training approach so that these displaced workers may be either thinking about reentry or retraining into other areas of employment. And then the fourth area has to do with real estate, and that is thinking about how do we have what we call shovel-ready real estate to offer businesses that want to come into our community. And then lastly, which when you think about a significant area that was impacted because of the pandemic, was the area of tourism. And so those are the 5 focus areas. They actually relatively naturally fell out to come to being agreed to by the steering committee on those areas because the companies themselves were seeing these as areas that we saw needing to be focused on, as well as when you think about economic development, these are the 5 areas that typically you would look for. We look for in that whole arena.
Joe
Snell, want to add anything there?
Joe Snell, did these areas make sense to you and the mission over the years that you and what you've been trying to accomplish at Sun Corridor?
Well, Bill, they did make sense to me, and I'm proud of some. And they probably, more importantly, they made sense to the New York Times. That if you didn't catch that story or your listeners did not, the New York Times did an article a few months ago that focused on communities that weren't just dealing with the health issue, but looking at the economic issue. And they called out Tucson and Sun Corridor and the Pivot Playbook of being one of the leaders in the country, way ahead of the game. So, yeah, it made sense but to me and to us internally, but it made sense to outsiders. And I think the New York Times is great validation for that.
And Steve, since these focus areas have been developed, what's the progress report on how you're doing with this?
So I tell you, Bill, each one of the areas had a steering committee, and now we're in the process of. In fact, we have already rolled out a number of things. When you come to the employee attraction and development area, one of the things we've done is put together an actual online activity that potential employees that want to relocate or thinking about Tucson can take advantage of and see that happening in real time. Other things
that's called ThriveTucson.com. That portal is ThriveInTucson.com.
Oh yes, thank you.
Sorry,
Bill.
Steve. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So what we're doing at this point in time, Bill, that's just an example. Is we are now looking at the implementation phase, and that's really where the action comes in, because we wanted a plan that was not just long on planning and short on action. We wanted one that actually has that action going on. So we have now, in the next step of this is putting together an action committee to now, and that's being done by Sun Corridor, to now lead us through the activities that have been identified in the Pivot Playbook to bring those out to reality. So we're in the middle of doing that as we speak.
Joe, I want to bring you in here about the whole idea of company recruitment. How has the landscape, Joe Snell, changed in the company as far as company recruitment in the post-pandemic era?
Well, yeah, it's changed. I think we're still trying to figure out how that changed and to what depth. For example, we do know that the remote worker was a big part of the pandemic. What we don't know is how many companies are going to have remote workers going forward, or at least a part of their workforce, or have a hybrid type of situation. And we're frankly banking on the fact that we're not going to go back to the way it was pre-pandemic, that companies are going to accommodate at least a portion of their workforce working remotely. So that changes the driver. They're not looking for commercial real estate, maybe to the same tune they were before. I can tell you that one of the things we are taking a strong look at is incentives. If remote workers are now part of the mix going forward, we have to start looking at maybe some different incentives where it's not just a property tax abatement for a company that builds a large facility. Maybe it's funding daycare solutions for people that are working. Maybe it's credits that people can create home offices. It's broadband, making sure we have the right connectivity. So there's a lot of variables under play. I will say, Bill, that we were very fortunate that we fared very well during the pandemic. We announced 15, basically just over one a month of companies moving in here, and one that was absolutely astounding in that we put we moved on a dime. We put a lot of effort and a lot of time into making sure we could work remotely, and we started that before the pandemic. And we had a company called Sandvik Materials, a biotech company that chose Tucson, and they never put a person on the ground. It was all done virtually. And that was covered a lot nationally because it was the first of its kind. So a lot of good stuff going into this. But Steve's right, this is a live strategy, and it evolves all the time. And a lot of this is underway.
And the whole workforce, Steve, Eggen, of the post-pandemic era is the way people are approaching work and working in areas people may want to choose. If they can work anywhere, they might want to choose Tucson, which would the whole landscape has changed, hasn't it, Steve?
Bill, that's exactly right. One of the things that I think many companies learned during the pandemic was that working remotely actually works. Many have been skeptical to that model, but I think companies are coming to the reality that says, we can have our workforce work remotely. It might not be 100% remote, but it can be a significant amount of remote, and it can be 100% in some cases. So that bodes well for Tucson, because what we can offer those people that are looking to work remotely, we can offer the ability to have certainly an affordability of housing that a lot of other areas don't experience. I know many people, the housing issue is significant, nationally, but when we look at those prices in Tucson as compared to Los Angeles or San Francisco, New York, San Diego, we have an advantage. That certainly is a positive situation for people that want to work remotely and can move to a place like Tucson.
Steve and Joe, we're going to have to wrap it up. But Joe Snell, where can people find out more about the Pivot Playbook? Would going to suncorridor.com be a good start?
It really would, and that's www.suncorridorinc.com. And I think that, there's a video, too, that, speeds it up a little bit that I think is well done, that people can look at or download the Pivot Playbook. At the end of the day, Bill, this is going to take a lot of organizations, a lot of people. We're going to have to build in some accountability, but I think that it's an exciting time for us. We're bringing in Richard Florida, the author of Rise of the Creative Class, September 9th for our annual luncheon and we'd like people to show up for that.
All right.
Good stuff.
Gotta go. Joe and Steve,
all right.
Thank you very much, both of you. Have a great day.
All right, Bill. Thank you. Have
Thanks.
a good one.
Thank you, Bill.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.